Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Before we begin, we want to tell you that this review is generated by AI.
Yes, artificial intelligence helped us to prepare for this episode.
Today, we are talking about preparing for the IELTS exam. We know you want to know the best way to get ready.
It's a very important test for many people.
We have looked at a few things to help you. The IELTS website, some tips from an IELTS teacher, and a page from the British Council. We hope you will feel confident and ready to take the IELTS exam after you listen to us.
That's our goal. We want to make sure you feel prepared and confident.
The IELTS exam tests 4 English skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking.
That's right. It's important to understand how the test works. Each part has rules and time limits.
You need to understand these rules. For example, you must know how much time you have for each section.
Exactly.
It's also very important to practice all 4 skills to improve your score.
Practice is key, just like anything else you want to get good at.
You can practice English every day. What are some good ways to practice English every day?
Oh, there are so many ways. You can read English books and newspapers, watch English films and TV shows.
I like to listen to English music and podcasts.
That's a great way to practice listening. And you can also try to speak English with your friends and family.
The important thing is to practice regularly.
Yes, consistency is key.
The information we read says that it's a good idea to take a practice test. Why is this?
Well, a practice test can help you understand your strengths and weaknesses in English.
It can help you to find your strong skills and your weak skills.
Yes, exactly. And when you know your weaker areas, you can really focus your efforts there.
For example, if you know that listening is a weak skill, you can practice listening more.
Exactly. Maybe you could try listening to English podcasts every day, like you mentioned earlier.
You can also ask a teacher to check your writing and your speaking.
That's a fantastic idea.
A teacher can give you ideas to improve.
Absolutely. A teacher can help you see mistakes that you might not notice on your own. They can also show you how to fix those mistakes. It's like having a coach who can help you improve your game.
One interesting thing I learned is that it can take 12 weeks to improve your score by just one band.
Wow. That's a long time.
It is a long time.
So it's really important to start preparing early.
The IELTS exam is not easy.
No, it's not. It's a challenging exam, and it tests a wide range of English skills. That's why it's so important to start preparing well in advance.
Maybe you can start preparing 3 months or 6 months before the exam.
Exactly. This will give you enough time to practice all 4 skills and improve your overall English level.
Let's look at some ideas for each skill. We can start with listening. One tip for the listening test is to listen carefully. You will hear the recording only one time.
That's right. You only get one chance to listen. So it's important to really focus and pay attention to every word.
If you miss some words, don't worry. Just try to keep listening and focus on the next part.
Absolutely. Don't panic if you miss a few words.
Another tip for the listening test is to practice shadowing.
Shadowing.
Shadowing is listening to English and then speaking the same words. It's a good way to practice speaking and listening at the same time.
Ah, I see.
It can help you to improve your pronunciation and stress.
So it's like mimicking the speaker.
Exactly.
That's a great idea. It's like learning a new dance move by watching someone else do it first.
Now let's talk about the reading test.
Okay, reading.
You need to read fast and understand what you are reading.
Yes, reading speed is important in this test.
There are different ways to read. Sometimes you need to read quickly to understand the main idea, and sometimes you need to read slowly to find specific information.
I see.
So you need to use different reading skills depending on the type of question you're answering.
Right, that makes sense.
It's important to practice reading with a timer. This will help you to learn to read quickly.
Good point. Time management is crucial for the reading test. You don't want to run out of time before you've answered all the questions.
The writing test has 2 tasks, Task 1 and Task 2. For Task 1, you look at information like a graph, and then write about the information.
So you have to describe the information presented in the graph.
Yes, you need to explain what the graph shows. You also need to use correct grammar and vocabulary.
It's like telling a story, but with a graph.
Task 2 is different. For Task 2, you read a question and then write an essay to answer the question.
Okay, so Task 1 is about describing visual information, and Task 2 is about writing an essay in response to a question.
The question for Task 2 is usually about a topic that many people talk about. For example, the question might be about education or the environment.
I see.
It's important to practice writing essays about many different topics.
Yes, that's a good point. The more you practice, the better prepared you'll be for any topic that comes up on the exam.
It is also important to learn how to write a good essay. There are rules for writing essays. For example, you need to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion.
Yes, the structure of an essay is very important.
And, of course, you also need to use correct grammar and vocabulary.
Of course.
Let's talk about the speaking test.
Okay, the speaking test, this is the one a lot of people get nervous about.
It has 3 parts.
2 parts.
Part 1 is like a short conversation with the examiner.
Okay.
They will ask you some basic questions about yourself. For example, they might ask you about your hobbies or your family.
So just general getting to know you type questions.
Right.
Oh.
In Part 2, you talk for 1 or 2 minutes about a topic.
So you have to give a little presentation.
The examiner gives you a card with the topic, and you have 1 minute to think about what you want to say.
Okay, so you get a minute to prepare.
You can make notes during this minute.
That's helpful.
This will help you to remember your ideas when you are speaking. And it's very important to speak clearly and slowly.
Yes. Speaking clearly is essential so the examiner can understand you.
The examiner needs to understand what you are saying.
It makes sense.
And Part 3 is like a longer conversation about the same topic from Part 2.
Oh, okay, so it builds on Part 2.
You and the examiner will discuss the topic in more detail.
So the questions get a bit more challenging in Part 3.
Yes, the examiner will ask you more difficult questions in this part. And you need to think carefully about your answers. It's okay to take a moment to think before you answer. The examiner wants to see if you can talk about a topic in a detailed way.
I see.
It is important to practice speaking English before the test.
Yes, practice is crucial for the speaking test. The more you practice, the more confident you will feel on the day of the exam.
You can practice with your friends or family. You can also practice by talking to yourself.
Talking to yourself can be a good way to practice.
The speaking test is about communication. You need to be able to talk to someone in English and have a conversation.
Right. It's not just about knowing grammar and vocabulary. It's about being able to use English to communicate effectively.
Now that we have looked to the 4 skills, let's talk about resources to help you prepare for the IELTS exam.
Okay, resources. Let's do it. There are many resources available. You can use practice tests, courses, books. You can even find a private teacher.
You need to be careful, though, because some resources are better than others.
That's true.
You need to find resources that are good. How can you know if a resource is good?
I would recommend looking for official resources. The IELTS website has official practice tests. The British Council also has official resources.
Those are great places to start.
And you can always ask a teacher for help, too. A teacher can tell you which resources are reliable and effective.
We found some interesting resources.
Oh, tell me about them.
One interesting resource is the IELTS Ready program from the British Council.
I've heard of that one.
This program has many practice materials and tips.
It's a good one.
Another good resource is the IELTS Advantage VIP course. This course teaches you about the 4 skills.
Oh, yeah, that's a popular one.
It also helps you to write better essays.
Essay writing is a big part of the IELTS exam.
You can also use their essay correction service. This service can help you to find mistakes in your writing.
That's a really helpful service. It's like having a personal writing coach.
You can also use the free online practice tests from the British Council. These tests can help you to understand the format of the IELTS exam.
Taking practice tests is a great way to familiarize yourself with the exam format and the types of questions you can expect.
It's a good idea to try these practice tests so you can see how difficult the IELTS exam is.
And it will also help you practice your timing. Remember, you need to be able to finish all of the questions in the time you have.
We've talked about a lot of things today. Let's remember the important points about preparing for the IELTS exam.
Sounds good. Let's recap.
The first point is to understand how the IELTS exam works.
Right. You need to know the rules for each part of the test and how much time you have for each section.
The second point is to find your weak skills.
Yes, identifying your weaknesses is so important because then you can focus your practice on those areas.
You can use a practice test to find your weak skills. You can also ask a teacher for help.
Exactly. A teacher can give you personalized feedback and help you create a study plan that targets your specific needs.
The third point is to use good resources. There are many resources available, but some are better than others.
It's important to use resources that are official and from reputable sources.
And it's important to practice English every day.
Absolutely. Consistent practice is key to improving your English skills.
You can practice reading, writing, listening, and speaking.
There are so many ways to practice English. You can read English books and newspapers. You can watch English films and TV shows. You can listen to English music and podcasts. You can even try speaking English with your friends and family.
It's also important to start preparing for the IELTS exam early.
Yes, the earlier the better. It takes time to improve your English skills, especially if you need to achieve a specific score.
If you need to improve your score by 1 band, it might take 12 weeks.
That's why it's so important to give yourself plenty of time to prepare.
Don't wait until the last minute to start preparing.
The more you practice, the more confident you'll feel and the better you'll do on the exam.
Remember, the IELTS exam is a test of your English skills. It's important to be able to use English in real-life situations.
Exactly. The IELTS exam is designed to assess your ability to use English for communication in everyday life, whether it's for study, work, or social situations.
Let's look at some more tips for the listening test.
Okay, more listening tips. Let's do it.
We already talked about listening carefully and practicing shadowing.
Right, those are great starting points.
Another good tip is to try to predict what you will hear. Before you listen to the recording, look at the questions. Think about what kind of information you need to listen for.
That's a good strategy. It can help you focus your attention and make it easier to pick out the key information.
For example, if the question asks for a name, you know you need to listen for a name.
Makes sense.
You can also practice listening for specific information like numbers, dates, and times.
There are lots of online resources and apps that can help you practice listening for specific types of information.
It's also important to practice listening in different situations.
What do you mean by different situations?
Well, you should practice listening to people with different accents.
That's a good point because you might encounter different accents on the IELTS exam.
And you should also practice listening in noisy places.
Right, because in real life, you're not always going to be listening in perfect quiet conditions.
This will help you to be ready for the listening test, because on the day of the exam, you might hear other people talking or noises from outside.
Good point.
Let's move on to some more tips for the reading test.
Okay, reading tips.
We already talked about using different reading skills and practicing with a timer.
Right, those are essential for the reading test.
It's also important to understand the different types of questions on the reading test.
There are a lot of different question types on the reading test.
Some questions ask you to find specific information in the text.
Right, like a date or a name.
Other questions ask you to understand the main idea of the text,
or the writer's opinion.
You need to learn how to answer each type of question. There are strategies for answering each type of question.
It's definitely worth taking the time to learn those strategies because they can save you a lot of time and help you avoid common mistakes.
For example, if the question asks you to find a specific word or phrase in the text, you can scan the text quickly to find that word or phrase.
Right, scanning is a really useful technique for finding specific information quickly.
But if the question asks you to understand the writer's opinion, you need to read the text more carefully.
Yes, you'll need to pay attention to the writer's tone and the language they use to express their viewpoint.
It's also important to practice reading texts about different topics.
The IELTS exam can have texts about many different topics. You might read a text about science, history, culture, anything really.
It's important to be familiar with different topics because this will help you to understand the texts more easily.
The more you read, the better prepared you'll be for the variety of topics that might come up on the exam.
Let's talk about some more tips for the writing test. We already talked about understanding the two tasks and practicing writing about different topics.
Yes, those are essential for the writing test.
It's also important to use correct grammar and vocabulary in your writing.
Grammar and vocabulary are super important for the writing test. You need to be able to demonstrate a good range of vocabulary and use grammar accurately.
You need to use grammar and vocabulary that's appropriate for the task. You also need to make sure that your writing is clear and easy to understand.
Yes, clarity is key. If your writing is not clear, the examiner won't be able to understand your ideas.
It's also important to organize your writing. You need to have a clear introduction, body, and conclusion.
The structure of your essay is really important. It helps the examiner to follow your ideas and see that you can organize your thoughts in a logical way.
Your introduction should tell the reader what you're going to write about. Your body should develop your ideas, and your conclusion should summarize your main points.
Right. The introduction sets the stage, the body provides the details, and the conclusion wraps it all up.
You also need to use paragraphs to separate your ideas.
Paragraphs are your friends. They make your writing so much easier to read and understand.
It's also important to practice writing under timed conditions.
Absolutely. Time management is crucial for the writing test. You don't want to run out of time before you've finished your essays.
You can practice writing under timed conditions by setting a timer for yourself and trying to write a complete essay in the time you have.
That's a great way to simulate the exam conditions and get used to writing under pressure. You'll also learn to manage your time effectively.
Let's talk about the speaking test again. We talked about the 3 parts of the speaking test. What are some tips to help us do well?
Well, one important tip is to speak clearly and slowly. The examiner needs to be able to understand you.
That makes sense.
And you should also try to use correct grammar and vocabulary.
It's okay to make a few mistakes though, right?
Of course, everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers.
But we should try to be as accurate as possible.
Yes, definitely. The examiner wants to see that you have a good command of English grammar and vocabulary.
What if I don't understand the examiner's question?
Don't be afraid to ask the examiner to repeat the question.
Oh,
You can say something like, "Can you please repeat the question?" Or, "Can you please explain the question?" It's better to ask for clarification than to try to answer a question you don't understand.
That's a good tip.
And another important tip is to give complete answers.
Don't just say yes or no.
Exactly. Try to give reasons for your answers and use examples to support your points.
So the examiner wants to see that we can speak English fluently.
Yes, fluency is important. But the examiner also wants to see that you can think critically and express your ideas in a clear and organized way.
Another important tip is to relax and be yourself.
I think that's probably the most important tip.
The examiner is not trying to trick you. They just want to see how well you can speak English.
Exactly. So just try to relax and have a conversation with the examiner.
What if I'm nervous?
If you're feeling nervous, take a few deep breaths and try to focus on the task at hand. Remember, you've prepared for this. You can do it.
We've talked about a lot of different resources to help people prepare for the IELTS exam. But are there any other resources we haven't mentioned yet?
Well, one really helpful resource is YouTube.
YouTube.
Yes, there are many YouTube channels that have videos about the IELTS exam.
Oh, that's interesting.
These videos can teach you about the different parts of the exam and give you tips on how to improve your skills.
So you can find practice exercises and tips on YouTube.
Exactly. And many of these videos are made by experienced IELTS teachers and tutors, so you know you're getting good advice.
And the videos are free.
Most of them are, yes.
Another resource I've heard is helpful is online forums.
Oh, yes. Online forums can be really useful. They're a great place to connect with other people who are preparing for the IELTS exam.
What can you do on online forums?
You can ask questions, get advice from other test takers, and share your own experiences. It's a good way to learn from others and get support from people who understand what you're going through.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of information about the IELTS exam in this episode.
We have.
Let's review some of the key takeaways one last time. First, it's important to understand the structure of the IELTS exam.
Right. You need to know the rules for each part of the test, the types of questions you can expect, and how much time you'll have for each section.
And it's also important to identify your weak areas in English so you can focus your practice on those skills.
Exactly. You can use practice tests and get feedback from a teacher to help you identify your weaknesses.
And there are so many resources available to help you prepare for the IELTS exam. We talked about practice tests, courses, books, private teachers, YouTube videos, online forums, and even mobile apps.
Don't feel like you have to use all of these resources. Just choose the ones that you think will be most helpful for you.
And remember, the most important thing is to practice regularly.
Yes, consistency is key. The more you practice, the better you'll do on the exam.
The IELTS exam is a test of your English skills and your ability to use English in real-life situations.
The exam isn't just about grammar and vocabulary, it's also about communication.
So relax, be yourself, and try your best. You got this.
Absolutely.
That's all for this episode. We hope you found it helpful. We want you to succeed on your IELTS exam.
Remember to check the links in the description for all the resources we talked about today.
And friends in the show, don't forget to subscribe,